Okay, so I should be live here, and I wanted to talk about this job listing just as an example of some of the nonsense that you'll come across. Um, so I use this site called Career Builder, which will apply you to a lot of jobs automatically under certain criteria, and it does seem to be like a semi-decent uh resource, right? But the things that it yields are often uh, contract um, commission based roles. So, there are people that are hunting for people that will work for them on the basis of giving them a percentage of your earned income. They want you to get some kind of license, is basically the majority of these things. They want you to get a real estate license, a health and life insurance license, a property insurance license, whatever else. Some kind of like health professional licensing, some sort of licensing. But the truth is that a generally effective person that's raised properly, I have a chat rate of 1 also. Can we just address this? Chat rate 1, but there's no chat. This chat window, top chat, live chat. Live chat is separate. I could go to the stream itself in a browser window, but that's disruptive. I don't understand why. Shows a chat rate of 1. Yeah, there's actually nothing there. Um, anyways, 8 to 10 years of experience. So, chief people officer with a very sizable salary. It's a HR staffing. This is a position that you would expect for somebody who is maybe like a mother, can we say? You know that whenever somebody is a mother, that they're going to be dependable at least enough to keep custody of their child, right? That's a very strong like fitness sign for employers, right? Uh, Whereas like everybody else has to bear the negative association of like, well, maybe they could or could not raise a child. You know, it's a pretty self-evident like fitness sign to an employer to have kids and be doing well in life, right? So I can kind of understand that. That's what more or less these things mean. But at the same time, that is kind of egregiously like unfair and also probably not even a real job because they're not actually probably looking for people that um children of autism spectrum disorder, if you really want to work with that. Personally, I think that I would not really want to waste time with kids that have severe disabilities. Like if I had children, I'd probably talk about that like before having children, right? Like I don't know. It's like I love, kids, and even kids that have autism spectrum disorder, they're probably awesome, but like I wouldn't necessarily want to spend all of my time with kids with ASD. So this job listing really isn't catered to me. But a lot of these job listings are like that, and especially in HR and management type stuff. It's like 10 plus years. It's like having like a 10-year-old child, you know, like, or being alive, or, it's like some of the people out there, they're like just stranger than you'd imagine, You have to understand there's like 300 million, 321 million, 30 million Americans or so. And then we also have like transitionary populations like H1B1 visas and things like that, right? And migrant workers. So, and then just tourism. Canadians are constantly like going over to America and, occupying the spaces and stuff, right? And yeah, there's also like billions of people overseas, like in India around a billion, in China around a billion. So there's so much money, right? And there's so many positions at so many random different places. And for the most part, a lot of them are like shell companies that like just set out like a cold lure where they don't intend to pay you any income. They just want to get you in a meeting and then like convince you to get a license of some sort or take a course of some sort and then work in a like scheme where they can like guarantee a certain economic outcome, right? And it's unfortunate. And the government pokes and prods with all of these different like incentivization programs for like recruiters and hiring and like you hire somebody who hasn't been employed or is, taking unemployment money. It gives you so much. I think that, if anything, it should work in reverse. I haven't taken any unemployment money despite being unemployed for quite a long time. I haven't sought to. And I worked with the Texas Workforce Commission to like work with people, and I got to see what people were receiving in terms of COVID money and talk to them directly and like their personalities and how they actually behaved through the state of Texas. So, you know, like I have opinions on, money like that, right? I want to work for my money and I want to have a homestead and like be able to do all this stuff. And I don't think that that's an unreasonable thing. And pay ranges towards the upper end of this is what you would expect a man that's going to be like achieving those kind of objectives is going to need to do those things. Just realistically speaking, there are people out there that are worth billions of dollars. So getting a couple millions of dollars is not that big a deal, right? Like to be treated with any form of respect or dignity in this economy coming from a background where you're aware of stuff at this scale and you're trying to like, you know, work to the best of your capacity, not to the best of your capacity, to the height of your capacity, right? So the best of your capacity implies that like you need to do something to improve your own game. Whereas, like, to the height of your capacity is removing limitations and removing any sort of like, oh, well, play at a disadvantage. You instead play on an even playing field. That's what you really want, especially economically. Uh, JP Morgan, I wish I had seen it sooner. I reapplied for a position. I don't think I have any shot in like getting that, but they're like coming up with very weird like AI type things. They like email out. It's probably an automated thing. You know, you keep struggling like with Magikarp using Splash and you get Gyarados, but it's a stupid metaphor and it's tragic that they even like force the point to be that way. Yeah. Um, I don't know. The difference between having money in a homestead and a proper place to be. I think so much goes wrong in the world from people's like improper lifestyles. If you want to go to a city, that's great, but then people that want to have space and live out, I don't know. John Stewart used to smoke a lot. He used to smoke a lot of cigarettes. He is what he would talk about whenever he started the Daily Show, like originally, like New York back then, everybody smoked, and it was just like a smoker's area. Things have changed a lot, and there are very old people out there. Like Ben Mala, he's such a character that makes you just go like, yeah, right. Like, And I heard an incendiary headline, which I don't believe is true, but is more or less there's a truth underlying it, and I'll explain that here. That Airbnb is no longer going to rent to conservatives, or they're going to ban conservatives, or something like this, right? That's like a YouTube clickbait topic. And my response would be, well, I think Airbnb, they have a lot of subprime locations that are really cheap. And people who are more conservative tend to be kind of like, whoa, this isn't what we want. Like they wanted something a little bit higher quality. Or, they're like, they have a lot of human, I wouldn't want to say trafficking, but like trafficking adjacent. It's just like people who are like on the move. They don't, like migrant worker, you stay in the Airbnb. It's kind of out in the middle of nowhere, but like it's the cheapest, most available. They have a lot of housing because they have like a lot of low scale. It's the kind of thing that if you came to the country without a lot of money from not a great background, you'd be like, oh, this is perfect for. That's what I saw whenever I looked at the Airbnbs. Um, I stayed in two, and they were both pretty. Like one was all right, and the other one was pretty awful. And then again, I mean, it was like terrible. It was really bad. Manager, talent acquisition, human resources, manager, training programs, director, talent management, and analytics. See, I can do all of that stuff, but I'm not the kind of person that you might traditionally associate with the lead of that kind of stuff, right? Because you think like, oh yeah, you just get a nice like mother with a nice family. You like she's very easy. Like there's a certain amount of shielding that you get from just being that person, right? And that's respectable and understandable, is what I'm saying. But at the same time, like it's a discrimination against other people and other types of people in their form of talent, like human training, whatever else. There's a whitewashing of what it means to be in HR or human management or training or talent or any of this other stuff. Think about directors and, you know, imagine what directors used to do is they would find people who were unmarketed talents and then they would market them and that's what would make them money, right? So Simon Cowell made a fuck ton of money off the Teletubbies, which I see as like this kind of almost like cruel, sarcastic, like mockery of children because it's so freaking stupid. It makes so much money off of it. I remember watching it whenever it was like not age appropriate and laughing at it because it's just like, what the fuck is this garbage that I am watching? That was the joke of it. It's like, I'm watching this just to see what the hell they're like showing kids because I think it's so stupid compared to like other things that you could be watching. Uh, anyways, but yeah, Simon Cowell also made his money off of other stuff, which is not as bad as that. But then probably some of it is as bad as, whatever you think of the person. I saw a picture of him on a jet ski once with the like logo of the compass, you know, and I was like, okay, I don't know if that's real or not. Probably though, because he has so much money and is so much, uh, so much notoriety and stuff like that, right? But that's the kind of director person. And then you could also have like somebody like Howard Stern. There's a lot of different people. You could have other examples, but radio in particular, you know, YouTube is it's still the same kind of deal. We're in a kind of 1980s. Like imagine it's the 1980s, but instead of everybody having like tape recorders and everything kind of being bad, you had to get like a radio broadcasting license to like send out signals and all this stuff. You have YouTube and you just have like a camera, a microphone, plugs directly into your computer, which accesses everything. In some ways it's great, but a lot of countries they put up barriers on the internet clearly. And I think this is an example of it, and it surrounds money. And that's why it's worth talking about. This is a very pertinent broadcast, right? Like, uh, the a lot of these jobs are imagined and they're like kind of nonsense. So it would be imagine some like wealthy person like that is like, it'd be nice if we just had like another like woman here who was like just like a mother who's like gonna like do all the errands and stuff. We just made a ton of money last year, you know. Like it's kind of fucking dumb, but that's how it goes, right? Like that's in Japan they still have like listings of like people's like physical stats in their like hiring practices often, right? They have like a country-wide like mandatory like weigh in and stuff like that. Uh that's like if I think that could be understood as a consequence of the United States involvement in Japan post World War II. It's like that sounds like something that the United States would totally do if they could. You know what I mean? Just like every, because then they're basically like your own. It's like treating every citizen like a soldier kind of thing, right? Like United States citizens don't have that kind of requirement because it's a big open huge place that you can fly over and you can go take crazy vacations and then it produces a lot of agricultural stuff. But you wouldn't want to spend your time out in the middle of nowhere. You go to the big cities and then you go to other areas of the world if you're super rich. That's what they do, right? So, and it's kind of a fool's gambit to think that you're going to leave your host country, like your own country, come to the United States, make a huge amount of money and like live a super great life doing something like off I don't know. There are a lot of not great areas where people end up like you come to the United States from some other country and you work at a gas station. I guess it beats being in that other country. But in the United States, you're still going to be relatively out in the middle of nowhere. You know what I mean? Without much going on and not that much opportunity. And like even though you're earning more, you're really not earning like more commensurate with how much the demand is of the economy in the United States to be able to perform. Right? Live chat. We have views one chat that disappeared. H1B1 visas should be fixing up India. Sundar Pichai should uh be the slumdog millionaire of India and go back and like fix literally everything. India having this many people that are trying to scam desperately in a crypto frenzy. They're like blinded by greed. They're like silly. They don't have any like compass of morals or anything like that. No ethics. It's just a huge stampede of populism, right? And they go online and they just send out spam messages to people and they have all sorts of random. And in a country of 1 billion people, that ends up being, you know, a huge pool of people. I don't know how many it is. I can't speak with confidence. I would suspect that it'd be in the ranges of at least tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions of people that are collectively involved in, these ecosystems. People that are tangential that wouldn't consider themselves involved that are kind of somehow enabling it without realizing it. They subscribe to a service which is ran by these schemes, which is just copy and pasted or something, or they like bought a cryptocurrency or used an exchange or mined with a pool. So, um, yeah, it's a weird time on the employment market because there's literally billions of people on the planet. At any given time, you would assume that like 2/3 or like would take a better position if they could find one. If they could really find like a better work situation that gave them more opportunity, they would go for that. So, and there's a lot of opportunity out there, but most of these listings they're illusory. Like this very well may not actually like even be a real position. It wouldn't even fill, or it wouldn't pay nearly that much. Or, it's only going to be like one person. And, furthermore, it's kind of exclusionary because they're typecasting a particular type of person. And the truth is that 8 to 10 years is probably really not necessary. Uh, I understand that like you have to be extremely selective, but just realistically speaking, it's a bad precedent. And also it's probably a fake job because it's on ladders. And ladders is just a job that lies. It's a job site that lies. Search jobs. They like some of it is real, some of it is bad, some of it is not. They charge money um to apply for you. I have not used this. I did like make an account and then they like hit you with the like paywall just to, like see where like what it looked like. But yeah, I didn't pay any money and I didn't use any of these like apply for you services. I did use Career Builder, which is kind of similar but different. A lot of the listings seemed weird. They also cold called me to try to get me to buy, and it's quite a lot of money. I think it's like $300, and they want you to pay like upfront for like an entire year. But if you do get a job, if you do get connections, that's kind of understandable. But like also you have to question their methods, and then they might try to like front run your salary by like talking to, you know, if they can get away with it, they'll do that kind of stuff. So I just the whole thing gives me a bad vibe. I wish that we had the world of walk in with a suit or whatever and just get the job that way. You know, if you had like newspaper listings for jobs and that was it, it'd be a much easier landscape to navigate. Um, but yeah, I can't trust this, and I wouldn't trust this, and everything I've heard is bad about it. They cold called me. On the one hand, you'd like to think that there's like good people out there and this is like good stuff, but they just want money. They get paid like regardless, and if they're good with what they do, they probably middleman your employer. Um, so yeah, forget this and forget this illusory world. I'm sick of it. Uh, with fake jobs everywhere. um, and impossible standards. People are looking for people that don't exist rather than recognizing the ones that do exist and then picking from the pool of those available people. That's what real talent recruiting is about, is you know all of the people and you know that they're going to be placed somewhere. And you just kind of take your time and work through everybody. And you just head snipe like literally every person. Imagine if you worked at Facebook very early on and then kept on keeping a really aggressive chain branch understanding of like associations of people. You more or less map out every social network there is, and then you can see the opportunity for social connections and where they exist, and then try to influence their connections and stuff. So you got to assume that's what people do. And that would fit with how some things have been in my life. But it's very, very strange. Wouldn't trust it, you know. It's like the FBI just decided to whatever everything else up with Apple and Google and Facebook combined. Most people are completely bought in. I'm sort of on the outside here. I really want quite a lot of money and to do my own thing and to remain essential Americana with just really not even Americana necessarily, but it kind of is. You got horses, essential humanism, martial arts, horses, handball, football, and that's about it, right? Like you want to run around outside, grow things, raise animals, and pass the seasons and spend your time online doing whatever and buying expensive, as in several thousands of dollars. I think you would want to have $20,000, $30,000 to just buy like random tools and things that cost a couple $100, $1,000. You know what I mean? You need to have that kind of money to spend. That's like the spending habits of a normal person in this world. And most of these jobs try to treat it like, okay, if they're going to pay a salary whatsoever, they try to treat it as a, we've done the math, we know how much it costs to live, you know. So and like we can earn money. Like, jobs that pay like 70,000, it's just like I understand that it's difficult as an employer to offer salaries to people. And a lot of times there are operations where it's like a huge deal that the money that is being exchanged. Whereas other corporations, it's kind of a rounding error. You know what I mean? It's not that big of a deal if a corporation is missing, $70,000 as opposed to a small business. Right. Uh, I don't know. But yeah, you got to be able to live for real. You want to do business with people that work in size, right? So you want to be making enough money and to be relevant. But at the same time, you don't want to be like wasting money. So I think that I'm pretty wise of how I spend money and like what I want to spend money on and how I prioritize spending money. I'm not necessarily like the best, but like also you have to be earning in a certain level to even like demonstrate that capacity because otherwise you don't have the ability to do anything. There's a certain level where you're just like dead, right? So why not just break away, earn $1 million or $2 and coast on that and make tons more through the the opportunities that that kind of money creates. It's like it's not that difficult to in the United States, you just have to find something that will actually pay it. Stuff like welding, it frustrates me that it requires any kind of degree at all, any kind of licensing. Like I don't know, I don't even know what's required. I would just buy my own damn welding equipment and watch a series of YouTube videos, and then probably I would go seek like a training class in person if I had tons of money and like the place and the time. And I understand the like role of certification, but it's also just kind of like stupid. Like you're gonna pay money to get like the ability to work a job. So first, yeah, you can work this job, but first you have to like pay money and then like work it for free. So worse than working for free, you have to pay money to work, and then and I'm not even I would never really want to be like a welder for trade, but it does earn pretty decent money pretty quickly. It's like one of the few things that does. And it's like, why do they put barriers up? All kinds of things. And yeah, I gotta wonder what a lot of these people I was watching the other day build ships, what they actually get paid, because, some of these yachts, they're very expensive. And a lot of them, I think, probably would be in the range of being able to afford their own, especially with the deals they have. And they probably build their own with the money they get. It's like the smart way to build if you're in the industry of building boats. Anyways, yes, chief people officer, whatever that means. It sounds kind of like a fake job. Sounds either like somebody that like, you know, kind of behavioral health. There's a million healthcare that you can go into. And there's a ton of job opportunities where it's like for women to take the jobs, right? It's not that big of a deal. Like it's a perfectly fine job for a woman to take. But then for a man, it's just like it doesn't end up working the same way. Like male nurse. Like okay, we all know that like that's not as desirable of a position to be in. who just make less money and have less like authority and less like learning, less, you know, you just have less. Yeah, it's the lesser position. That's just the end of the story. Like one has gone through med school, one has not. One is a nurse, one that has also probably gone through training. And a lot of times, I don't think that there's really that huge of a difference between what these people are capable of. But like, it's something where you have to be on the ball and already engaged in, like, who's going to take the time to go commit to something later on? I don't know. Does it really need to take for like 8 years plus residency to be a doctor? Probably, yeah. I mean, like, why not? But also at the same time, like, roles that are somewhere in between. And I don't even really care about formal. I would never want to work in healthcare. You know, they lower the standards a lot of the time to get people into these roles, which are non. They'll have like the doctor that signs off on everything, and then there are these other people that are doing all the others. Sometimes it's like a weekend at Bernie's situation where they just have like this old person that they like that signs scripts for everybody, right? Like, I'm sure, right? There's like tons of situations that you would not expect in hospitals. Uh, I think that people overcomplicate medicine. They like to think that there's more. Doctors like to think a lot more of their education. They really attack WebMD and stuff like that. But then people generally, there's a lot of stories where their lived experiences is that they like check their symptoms and then find a correlation to something. It's like stupid. It's stupid to scoff at that as a doctor. Nobody wants to be replaced by anything, and nobody like if you're smart, you say that the role of the doctor is still there, but people always got second opinions. Now it's like a free second opinion or a free immediate diagnosis opinion. And then a doctor using WebMD probably has a little bit more insight than just a WebMD search on its own a lot of the times. But yeah, you probably do encounter some weird people as a doctor that just ignore basic common sense. Like, this is what we're seeing, and you're trying to interpret it in a way other than what it is. But yeah, healthcare and human resources, just the general assumption of a good character for females and a sort of un inherent untrustworthiness of males, right? This is the sort of stereotyping. um I don't know, it's weird. It's kind of true, strange, working with people on H1B1 visas in really technical roles. I don't mind it, but like, I want to make sure that I have a really good microphone speaker situation, both of them this time. Be nice if people are actually like turning on their cameras or when I'm going in person. I don't really care what I'm doing. I just want to be making a lot of money because that's what's required to be able to do the things that you want to do. There's so many people who make a lot of money through drugs and music, like money laundering drug money through music a lot of the time, or like you play at the concert where all the drug users go, there where you're making your money. You know what I mean? You're entertaining them. You see this sort of loop there. So there's a lot of people out there that make millions of dollars like that, and then they're completely fine legally. They just get away with it. And then you go try to make money legally, and it's like a slog where everybody's trying to lowball you and get you to do some sort of train to hire specific to them. It's really easy to put a job listing out there, and then respond very quickly. So these auto apply sites, my opinion, is generally disfavorable because auto apply is not, you want to target a specific industry and a specific job. Uh, I kind of did, I did that first. I targeted specific industry and specific types of jobs, and then I used Career Builder. And after that, so that's about all I have to say there. I'm going to probably leave soonish. I have not played any Kingdom Hearts. I might just wait until later for that one. Is because the truth is that people that are looking for work, they just don't have a preference after a certain point. Their preference is in terms of their salary. You know, as far as this genre of work, it all blends together. Anything to do with uh finance or human resources or management or any kind of like bank, like any of these kind of jobs where any technical programming adjacent role, anything at all, a scrum lead, project manager, whatever else. Do you really care where you're working, or do you just care about how much money is being deposited into your account so that you can sustain whatever it is you're working on in your own personal life? Because it's probably about your personal life. People can realistically say that. And the pressure that, say, a mother has, like you said, you're a mom of like two, and you're working a remote recruiter job or something like that, and they pay you a salary plus commission. Yeah, it's like, oh yeah, you get treated like it's like easy to land something like that because it's very low risk, it's low risk, low reward, but it's guaranteed reward. Like it just works. Like that model is how everything has been going. Like it's really funny. And then for men it's just entirely different. It's you got to be extremely a lot of these people are either Ivy League or nothing kind of people. Um elite coder type elite programmers. Uh I don't know. I want to take up the hobby, but I'm more concerned about money than learning leak code tricks. I don't have the bandwidth for that whenever, money is such an occupying preoccupying force. Right. If I could just relax and be like in a place where I have the characteristics of what I want for a home, then I'd be really, and I'm making enough money to sustain it, and I'm not worried about that at all. I'd be really keen to like take up Leet code and make full use of my time, like as I'm making full use of my time every day. 10 minutes here and there for a couple of problems is not that big of a deal. But being as I'm completely preoccupied with money, there's just no way. I just don't have I cannot sit down and just focus on a set of random problems like that. Yeah, so that's all I gotta say. These job boards really not a good situation. Everything that's going on with the hiring practices of basically every institution. Christian can.
Hey, don't talk to me like that, bencher. What is going on with you?
Okay.
Are you trying to get my meat?
Oh yeah.
Baljit.
This thing right here, it'll tell you real quick. If it's stolen, it won't buy them
Yes.
for me. So they ain't stolen.
Can you click the links and stuff like this?
Links?
Yes.
Must not work. Like these.
He's pretty funny. Um, 400 cars. There's probably somebody out there that made money off of that. That's completely fine. That's not gonna even get arrested or like targeted. It's just completely like removed somehow, completely disassociated. They just funnel the money. These dumb idiots are just stealing cars, you know. There's some random person who's a beneficiary of all of this.
This episode of SciShow is supported. We're making big progress toward making asbestos really, for real, illegal in the United States. Because, yes, one major type of it was still allowed. The reasons it was still around were not good, but they were reasons. Let me explain. And phasing out its use in industrial facilities. Congress passed the legislation in 2016, and it's finally being implemented. Chrysotile is already illegal in the EU and more than 50 other countries. New uses and imports of other types of asbestos have been generally banned in the US since 1989, though there are some frustrating loopholes. Even so, how did this other type sneak under the radar? To explain, let's take a look at asbestos itself. Asbestos is strong and fire retardant, so back in the day, it was used in loads of products, including water supply lines, housing insulation, and brake pads. In its heyday in the 70s, there were over 100 million tons of it mined every year in the US. Asbestos is a naturally occurring fibrous mineral, but just because it's natural doesn't mean it's good for you. It's made of mostly silicon, but the other elements that make it up vary, giving us a variety of different types of asbestos. Amphibole asbestos includes chrysotile and amosite. They have brittle, needle-like fibers and were used for tiling and various types of insulation, including in homes. They're the type of asbestos that was already banned. Well, again, like loopholes, but theoretically banned. Chrysotile asbestos, which has curly fibers, was thought to be less dangerous than its cousins in the amphibole family. Chrysotile is the most widespread asbestos in use today. It's used for brake pads, asphalt, and plastics, among other things. The problem is, both types of asbestos fibers get into your lungs and can't be cleared out by the body. They tend to collect in the alveoli, the tiny sacs in your lungs where air gets exchanged with blood. This is as bad as it sounds. Asbestos fibers are abrasive and can lead to lung damage and scarring. Also, immune cells.
Yeah, we don't want asbestos. Asbestos is bad. I think that's something we generally agree on. So,
Less cancery? Well, industrial workers who work with chrysotile still have higher rates of lung cancer and mesothelioma. Unfortunately, chrysotile is commercially important, so that means there are motivated interests trying to show it's less harmful than amphibole asbestos. Chrysotile deserve its free pass? Well, there seems to be a grain of truth here, which is that chrysotile can be cleared by the lungs more quickly than amphibole fibers. Unfortunately, these chrysotile fibers can still do damage before they get moved along, and chrysotile on its own has been shown to cause mesotheliomas and lung cancer. So there's no way to make chrysotile asbestos safe for the people who work with it. The diaphragm has to be durable. We definitely don't need evidence by installing
The owner of Incognito Market has just been identified and arrested thanks to some truly unthinkable OPSEC mistakes. This guy should have known better. Also in your hacking news roundup, a government insider is raising the alarm about vulnerabilities in mobile networks, and Iran has a new hacking campaign with some pretty clever phishing tactics. But first, the alleged owner of Incognito Market has just been revealed as a Taiwanese guy, Ray Xianglin, and if found guilty, he's facing a minimum sentence of life in prison. But before we get to how he was caught, what do we know about the guy? Well, quite a lot, because just like any 23-year-old in the tech industry, he has a nice little personal website which helps tie everything together. He describes himself as a back-end and blockchain engineer and Monero enthusiast. He's been quite active in the Monero subreddit over the past few years, even running his own Monero nodes. He also appeared in a YouTube video on the Pentester Academy YouTube channel demoing one of his open source projects. Ray Shan did a great job of hiding in plain sight. His X account shows that his latest and probably last tweet for a good while was about analysing crypto transactions of popular darknet markets, which included his baby, Incognito Market. The guy seems pretty knowledgeable on crypto. He even has a Chainalysis cert for blockchain analysis. This all makes how he was caught all the more amusing. Court documents show that on one occasion, Bitcoin from Incognito's admin wallet was sent to what court documents call Swapping Service 1. Then, minutes later, roughly the same amount, but in Monero, was deposited in a crypto exchange account registered in the guy's real name, with his driver's license even on file for KYC. Now, had this been a one-off, you might just call it a coincidence, but he repeated this cash-out method on numerous occasions, and in one case, when the swapping service confiscated his Bitcoin due to it coming from Incognito, he publicly posted on a forum the time he sent his funds and the amount, which helped the feds identify the exact transaction and his wallet. But it gets worse. He used that Incognito admin wallet to pay for various domains on Namecheap, some costing tens of thousands of dollars, and that Namecheap account just so happens to be registered in his real name, again directly connecting him to the dark web marketplace. And it turns out the feds have been on the tail of Incognito for years. Court documents reveal that the FBI executed search warrants on Incognito servers in 2022 and again in 2023, revealing the site's DDoS prevention system as well as a database containing a history of all completed transactions. At its peak, Incognito Market had over 250,000 users and was raking in $5 million per month in orders, rising to become one of the most popular and trustworthy darknet markets of its time. So you might have thought this takedown would have put the darknet community in a somber mood. Well, that might have been the case had its operator retired gracefully. Incognito pulled an exit scam in March and made darknet history when they held their users to ransom, threatening to leak the contents of private messages between buyers and vendors if vendors didn't pay a hefty ransom. Despite the fact that on April 1st, the market's operator revealed that this was just one big April Fool's joke, a bunch of vendors had already paid up and people just weren't happy. And so the reaction of the dark web community to his arrest is just as you'd imagine. And interestingly, the feds aren't the only people to have uncovered his identity. The owner of Dread, Hugbunter, says he linked Ray Xiang to Incognito's owner, better known by the name Pharaoh on Dread, after Pharaoh shared a list of Monero nodes, one of which wasn't mentioned on any public list anywhere on the interwebs, other than Ray Xiang's personal site. I thought, he can't be this stupid to share his own nodes like that, but his site made me believe instantly that this is him. Hugbunter explains that when Incognito pulled their little extortion scheme, he did, for a moment, consider doxing Ray Xiang, but changed his mind when those private messages weren't leaked. I'm no lawyer, but the case against Ray Xiang seems pretty solid. They even found a hand-drawn flowchart detailing the inner workings of Incognito that he had emailed to himself months before Incognito was even launched. The guy then made the mistake of a lifetime after he boarded a flight from St. Lucia to Singapore, which just so happened to have a stop in New York, where upon touchdown he was promptly arrested. A whistleblower within America's cyber defense agency has spoken out about how security problems in mobile networks that have been known about for years are still to this day being used by spies to, well, spy. The root of the problem lies in the mobile network protocol SS7. It's used by mobile networks around the world when you venture outside of your cell carrier's network and start roaming. The protocol essentially allows mobile networks to communicate with each other, making sure your text messages are forwarded, calls are relayed, and so on. And according to Kevin Briggs, CISA's senior advisor for telecommunications, there have been numerous recent successful attempts to exploit SS7, which have seen people's locations tracked, voice and text messages monitored, and he claims it's even been used to deliver spyware to victims' phones. But this, he says, is just the tip of the proverbial iceberg, and that the problem goes a whole lot deeper. The problem with SS7 lies in the fact that it was developed back in a time when people generally didn't put too much thought into security. As such, the protocol was designed with inherent trust, meaning one cell carrier could use the SS7 network to tell another, hey, your customer just connected to our network, so we're going to need a list of their text messages so we can forward them to them. And the other carrier would happily oblige. So if an attacker were to compromise a network, or maybe even set up their own, then they could potentially send fraudulent SS7 messages. In practice, however, doing that is complex, since different carriers have different roaming agreements, and nowadays mobile networks have firewalls to detect malicious access, and other layers of security built on top of this very insecure protocol. As such, an attacker really has to know what they're doing. I mean, you're not going to find a tutorial for this stuff on YouTube. However, hacking it is clearly not difficult enough, especially given we have a high-level guy within CISA publicly speaking out about the issue without approval from his agency. In the real world, exploiting SS7 is typically reserved for advanced threat actors like intelligence agencies, which might be some clue why there's been insufficient efforts to address the problem. However, the tide may be turning, because this CISA guy isn't the only person to raise awareness here. US Senator Ron Wyden, who is pretty much the only politician that ever comes up on this channel for actually doing good things, recently published an open letter urging Biden to do something about the problem. And the FCC did recently launch a probe into all this. However, it's very early days and there's no guarantee this will result in real action. Researchers at Google have uncovered a cyber espionage campaign being operated by Iran's APT-42. This group has been around for a couple years now and is thought to be affiliated with Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps intelligence organization. Bit of a mouthful. Google says this new operation targets all kinds of people, NGOs, media organizations, legal services and activists, but all with the same aim of hacking into and then gathering as much intel from the victims as possible. Step 1 of the campaign is building trust. It all starts with a totally fake sock puppet persona which contacts a victim via email. Over time, they build a rapport and gain the victim's trust before launching the next stage of the campaign, harvesting credentials. This can take various forms, though in one case, the sock puppet said they wanted to set up a meeting with the victim and sent what appears to be a Google Meet link. On first glance, the page looks totally legit. I mean, it's even hosted on Google's domain. However, the URL in the bottom left is an indicator that something just ain't right. You see, the bad guys here are hosting the site using Google's website builder, which gives them that totally legit Google domain, adding a hell of a lot of authenticity. However, the dead giveaway is that the page asks for verification, asking you to sign in with your Google account, which does nothing but gives the miscreants your credentials. There's a few variations of this harvesting credential step. Sometimes the bad guys will use a law document to trick the victim into handing over their Dropbox creds, other times it's a fake YouTube login page, or in some cases it might be a fake LinkedIn website which grabs your Outlook creds. It's all tailored based on the specific victim. The next stage of the operation, infiltrating the target's cloud environment, involves the bad guys logging into the victim's account and exfiltrating emails, documents, pretty much anything of interest. And in order to blend in, this isn't automated. The hackers do it the old-fashioned way, using the built-in tools of the cloud environment to manually sift through documents and download what they're after. The Google researchers explained that in some cases, the Iranian hackers managed to gain access to a victim's RDP sessions, in which case they'll explore the victim organization's environment using native Windows commands to avoid detection, before stuffing files into 7-zip archives and then just downloading them. In this campaign, the Iranian hackers don't try to in any way disrupt the victim's systems. Rather, this campaign is purely focused on gaining as much intel as possible from organizations which have proven themselves to be, shall we say, hostile to Iran's interests. As always, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next video. Have a good one.
Check out what's going on Twitch. The stream will die.
I have no items.
Counting office. I was asked to count.
It's everything, you know, like. So it's, you know, me, I just gotta do what I gotta do.
Option to protect with Suicune if he had it. Otherwise, you hope that you survive the double hyper voice. Of course, one play that Drampa could have made.
2018 championship. Yeah, I don't really necessarily see myself getting into Pokemon heavy unless I can do like ROM hacking and just make the best Pokemon. I mean, I could play Pokemon like that, but like I don't know. And play it like once or twice, but like not. I thought about making a deck of cards. I never really play the like I know how to play the Pokemon TCG, but I never do. And I have some random old cards. I bought a few that were relatively cheap. In the future, I might finish that deck out at like $100, $200. It's the kind of thing that retains its value in large part because you're buying what effectively amounts to another form of fiat. You can just take that deck of cards and get another sum of cash that's usually at least like 60 to 80 to 100 to 120 or 40 or even 200%, you know, if you get lucky on like the cost of the cards or whatever. So, but yeah, Pokemon is a bit much. It's one of those things which is hard to be a fan of because it's so old. There's so many different offshoots of the franchise. I'd have to like go to Japan or something to be a huge fan of Pokemon again. It's not. Time.
China claims to have the most advanced fire extinguishing technologies in the world. But the reality is, China's fire and rescue department is the biggest joke in the world. You can't count on them to put out fires or to save people, but they can certainly entertain people with their hilarious acting skills.
You just gotta brush your teeth with a stick.
So let me show you exactly how incompetent the fire and rescue department is and help you understand why is it like this in communist China. Welcome to my channel.
What the
My
fuck
name is
that
Ali.
was?
If you like my content, please help me by liking, sharing, and subscribing. So why is China's fire and rescue department so incompetent? Is it because of a lack of funding? That's certainly not the case. Look at how much high-tech toys they're able to showcase, from robot dog to robot tank, various drones, and robot firemen. And look at this automatic monitoring water cannon. It automatically detects and targets fire. It also works on moving targets. Well, sort of. But none of this can compare with the fire extinguishing missiles that point and shoot at the target. These are repurposed military-grade weapons. Each truck can carry 24 missiles, and the missiles are filled with powder. This is developed specifically for putting out fires in skyscrapers, because the highest a fire engine can reach is 113 meters, but these missiles are not limited by this height. It can shoot accurately, and once it breaks the window, the powder inside will put out the fire, supposedly. So far, everything sounds great. However, this technology came out in 2017 and has been more
All right, Casey. Well, the other big AI news this week happened at Google I/O, the company's annual developer conference, which was held on Tuesday in Mountain View. I couldn't make it this year, but you went and attended, and tell me what it was like.
Well, once again, the heavy burden of doing the actual reporting on this podcast falls to me, but I was only too happy to do it, Kevin, so we'd have some fun things to talk about. But I knew you would be sad to miss it, so I went ahead and I got you the official 2024 Google I/O tote bag.
Oh, that's very nice.
Yeah. Now, if you're just listening to the podcast, you should know Kevin just accepted the tote bag in flagrant violation of the New York Times ethics policy, and we do have that captured on video. But listen, Kevin,
I think I can accept gifts as long as they're not worth more than $25.
That's definitely
the policy.
That definitely isn't. It's made out of publications that Google killed last year. So. Anyways, we had a great time.
Well, thank you for the gift. I will put it in my tote bag of tote bags.
Okay, great. Well, listen, we had a good time down there. Now, I will say, I do want to tell this story, and the story makes me look annoying, but I just got to get it off my chest anyway. It actually sucked getting into Google I/O this year. I've never had a problem getting into Google I/O before. I've been going for more than 10 years. And yet this time there was something now maybe this has been true in previous years, but I did not notice it until this time. They had Live Nation managing this event, okay?
Wow.
And I think that's just because monopolies love monopolies, and so they want to make sure that they sort of help each other out. And so anyway, there's this one entrance that the press has always been able to use. And so I went to use it this time around, and they were like, basically, scram, kid, go wait in a line with everyone else. And I said, okay, fine. And I stand in 15 minutes in this other line, with everyone else. And then finally, a man with a little pedal says, oh, by the way, if you're in the press line, you should go to that other entrance, which was the first place that I went.
Oh, thank God. I was worried you were going to have to wait in a line for 15 minutes with the hoi polloi.
I only got through half the line.
Thank God you got your VIP pass that lets you cut the line.
So listen to this. So then I get back to the press entrance. I say, hi, I'm the press. They just told me to use the press entrance. The guy goes, no, you can't use this entrance. And Kevin, I had to raise my voice. I said, I've literally just been told to come here. And then finally, the guy throws his hands up and it's like, well, okay, if you're going to make a whole thing about it, then just use the entrance.
Wow.
So yeah, so I got in there. By that time,
wow, this guy a podcast. He starts acting like a diva. All of a sudden, it's wait in this line? Do you know who I am?
Listen, all I wanted to do was find out how this company is about to destroy my business. And the very least they could do was let me into here.
Did you say Google me?
I did not say Google me.
I'm shocked. It's very effective around there.
All right. So, listen.
So set the scene.
It's a developer conference. It's at the Shoreline Amphitheater in Mountain View. It was a balmy day, sort of really California, showing off its best side. And in the morning, they have a big keynote where for 2 hours, Google says, here are all of the things that we have been working on that we're planning to release in the next year that we can fit into a 2-hour presentation. And, as you probably guessed, they had a lot to say.
Yeah. So let's go through some of what they announced on Tuesday. They announced a new AI video generation tool called VO, a new AI image generation tool called Imagine 3. They also announced another version of their Gemini flagship AI model called Gemini 1.5 Flash, which is optimized to be fast and cost efficient. And they announced a version of Gemini 1.5 Pro Is it Gemini Pro 1.5 or Gemini 1.5 Pro?
That's none of my business. There was so much word salad at this event, and I'm just going to see if any of it ever shows up in my life ever again. That's my approach with everything you just said.
Right. So they announced a larger context window that will allow developers to try 2 million tokens in their context window.
Now, that's actually a big deal.
Why?
Okay, so if you're not familiar with what a context window is, it's basically how much of your stuff can you bring to the AI to have it look at. Why does this matter? Well, maybe you're a graduate student and you have a bunch of papers that are PDFs and you want an AI to help you summarize them, to ask questions of them. Well, now all of a sudden, instead of maybe just uploading one PDF, with 2 million tokens, you'll be able to upload, like thousands of pages
Entire
potentially.
books.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, we should say that the 2 million token window, that is available only in preview. But if you pay Google $20 a month for their little Gemini Advanced thing, you now have up to 1 million tokens, and that is much bigger. So that's important.
Yeah. So that's some of their AI announcements. But I want to spend most of our time right now talking about something else that Google announced, which is that Google is now bringing generative AI answers directly into its core search engine. So starting this week, hundreds of millions of Google users in the US will start seeing a feature called AI Overviews. This is a feature that used to be called Search Generative Experience when Google was sort of testing it out.
Another huge win for the Google branding team. Search Generative Experience.
Right. So this is a feature that basically when you go to Google and you search for something, Google will generate an AI summary that will live in the search results page above the traditional search links. This feature has been rolling out gradually, but they said that as of this week, hundreds of millions of users in the US will see it, and by the end of the year, it will reach over 1 billion users.
Yeah.
So what do these AI overviews actually look like?
Well, so there's what they look like today, and there's what's coming. What do they look like today? It is a box on top of search. It's some bullet points, essentially a web page within a web page that summarizes the topic for whatever that you've been looking for. But Google's plans are much more ambitious. They showed off a ton of examples. For example, if you move to a city, you can just sort of say that to Google, and you'll get an AI overview that says, here's everything that you might be interested in now that you move to a new city. We'll help you find a dog walker. We'll help you find a dry cleaner. Maybe you want to plan an anniversary in Dallas. It will say, well, here are some great spots for an anniversary dinner. And based on the time of year, we're going to show you a place with a roof deck because it's warm outside, right? Google executives love to talk about travel. Can I just tell you my quick joke about every tech demo?
Yes.
This is my impression of every tech demo. Okay, ready? I'd love to visit Antarctica for lunch with my wife, but there's only one problem. Where am I going to get a helicopter? That's every tech demo I've ever seen.
It's so true.
Yeah.
It's so true. It's like when I'm looking to furnish my vacation house in Tahoe, but the only place with the custom boar's head statues is in Zanzibar.
That's right.
How can I arrange 2-day shipping? It's ridiculous.
Exactly. So they had a travel example, which was basically like, I'm planning this trip abroad, and with this this AI tool, it'll say, okay, well, we know what your flight times are because we read it in your Gmail, and based on that, we're going to sort of have you do this dinner the first night that you arrive, and then we'll plan a walking tour for the next day, and they'll put together the whole itinerary for you, or they'll plan a whole meal plan for you. So this stuff is starting pretty small and frankly boring, but the vision here is this stuff is going to be doing planning for you. This thing is an AI assistant that lives within Google now, that is doing research projects for you, and that pretty soon is probably going to be booking travel for you.
Yeah. And I knew that this had been announced at I.O. because my phone started blowing up with texts from other journalists, people who work in the media industry, that mostly said some variation of, we are so screwed.
Yeah.
And I think we should just explain a little bit why the online media business is freaking out about this change, because I don't think it's totally obvious unless you work in our industry.
Yeah, well, so much of the way that the internet is funded depends on people visiting individual web pages. Those web pages have ads on them. A lot of those ads served by Google, by the way. They also, as people visit those web pages, publications, publishers, businesses have a chance to get you to sign up for a newsletter, maybe subscribe to something. So Google is this massive funnel that winds up being the economic engine of the entire web. And the way that it works is people Google things and they see links and they click on the links, right? And this has been the state of affairs for so long now that I think people take it for granted. Once you take an AI and you start to just summarize those links and essentially tell people, you don't have to visit
and
websites
the price of bread
anymore.
in a grocery
All of a
store
sudden, that
symbolizes
thing
the
starts
high
to break
price
down.
of paradise.
You know,
The
there was this
council
phrase
chair
that they
is
used a
so
couple
upset
times
he's
at the keynote,
filed a
Kevin.
formal
They
complaint.
said,
Eddie
let
Dowd is here
Google-
with our top story tonight. Eddie.
Well, we're all used to shelling out more money at the checkout counter these days, but $13 for a loaf of bread? This one really struck a nerve. That's right, $13.39 for a Love's Jumbo Wheat Bread at Times Supermarket in Lihue.
I thought it was a joke. I really did.
Kauai County Council Chair Mel Raposo says he verified the price, then expressed his frustration online, prompting hundreds to vent their own outrage and dismay.
It struck a nerve. My two kids live in the mainland because they cannot afford to live here. You know, I can understand $1 or $2 difference. We've grown to accept that here on Kauai. In my mind, that was excessive.
Kauai's $13 bread is even more expensive than that on Lanai, where the same bread was $11.79. We went to 3 different stores in Honolulu. One store was selling that same bread for $11.39. Another was $10.19, and the lowest was $7.99.
It's definitely doubled in price for pretty much everything.
The manager of Molokai Hot Bread says to make the same profit they did before the pandemic, their bread should be priced around $11, but they strain to keep it at $8.
Everybody's struggling, so we try to set a profit where we can survive, but we definitely want to keep the lowest cost possible because we know how hard it is. On the stress on the families to survive is pretty crazy right now, you know.
The latest UHERO report shows Honolulu's inflation in March rose 4.8% over the previous year. That's 34% higher than the national increase. Some consumers are fighting back by shopping elsewhere. Target, for example, is cutting prices on brand products. These Target shoppers use their phones to price check.
I think it's a good thing that they're doing that because they're allowing consumers to come in, offering them better prices. I will never pay $10 for a loaf of bread.
Councilman Raposo says he's filed a complaint about the bread with the State Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs. Now, we did reach out to Times and are waiting for an explanation.
Do the Googling for you. And it struck me so hard because the implication there is that being on the web is a chore and the Google of the future is not going to take you to the web. Google is going to give you everything you need within Google itself.
Yeah, that struck me too. And they also talked about sort of taking the legwork out of search. And as they were saying that, I was thinking, like, that legwork has funded basically the entire digital media. I mean, I don't want to overstate things. Google is not everything, but it is by far the biggest supplier of traffic to many digital publications. So Google executives have obviously anticipated that publishers might freak out about this change, and they sort of had some responses ready. They said, in our tests, we've found that users who saw these AI overviews tended to conduct more searches and visit a more diverse set of websites. They also said that the links that appear in these AI overviews, because there's a little section at the bottom of the overview where you can go to click on things to learn more. They said that those links got more clicks than the sort of traditional search links below them. And Liz Reed, the vice president of search at Google, said on Tuesday that the company would, quote, continue to focus on sending valuable traffic to publishers and creators. But I think it's fair to say that publishers are skeptical.
Well, and she said we're going to send valuable traffic. She didn't say we're going to send more traffic because guess what? They're not going to. And when analysts look at this, they're predicting somewhere between 20 to 40% of Google search traffic is at stake here. And I think it's fair to say that most publishers do not have a plan for what happens if they lose 40% of their traffic in a year.
Yeah, that's clearly the risk here is that all of this traffic will just evaporate. I also read a good post on Search Engine Land, which is a good website that covers the search industry.
And one of my favorite theme parks.
They were basically talking about how the problem for publishers here is not just that they might see their overall traffic decline, but that they can't really do anything about it. You know, with other chatbots, other AI experiences, publishers can say opt out. They can block the crawler for ChatGPT or Claude from accessing their site if they don't want those products to be able to summarize what they find on their websites. But with Google, because their crawler also includes because their technology also crawls for the search index, there's no way right now to decouple those things. You can't be a publisher and say, I don't want my content to appear in these AI overview summaries. I only want to be listed on regular search results in Google. You have to kind of say yes or no to the whole thing.
Yeah.
But I think overall, if you are a publisher that derives a big portion of your traffic from Google, this is a big deal for you. This is the big one. I would be pulling the fire alarm.
Yeah, it is absolutely time. But you know, Kevin, at the same time, I have to say, in some ways, we had to know this was coming. You know, I've been writing about Google for more than 10 years now. And you go back a decade, and they were talking about Google as the Star Trek computer. This is their vision. You know, if you've seen Star Trek, you know, Captain Kirk or whoever will just say, computer, and then, you know, is able to ask the question, and then they can fire the photon torpedoes or whatever. And that is a world where, you know, the computer was not saying, and actually I got that fact from the New York Times, right? And here's a link.
Here's the Wirecutter's favorite photon torpedoes.
Right? The sci-fi vision of this has always been all of the inputs, all of the
I was always kind of, I'm reflecting on this now. I was always kind of in favor of Star Wars over Star Trek. And I still kind of guess like I get that position because now Star Wars is kind of lame and Star Trek is cool because William Shatner is still alive. And he had a cool life and a cool gig with Star Trek. The real answer is neither. It's like absolutely neither. What else is the point of these appearances? No Kingdom Hearts 2, right?
labor is abstracted away, and you just have this perfect assistant. So they've told us that this is what they were building. I think it just seemed so fantastical for so long that publishers, and by the way, not just publishers, anybody else who depends on Google traffic helping people discover their business, which is a lot of people, right? It was so easy for those folks to just dismiss that. But the point of what we're saying today is the moment is here. The Star Trek computer is coming into view, and people really do need to have a new plan.
Yeah. Is there anything that publishers can do at this point to sort of keep their Google traffic from falling off a cliff or to adapt to these new AI overviews?
You know, I think the only thing that works, and it's really hard, but you have to build a direct connection with an audience or with a customer base if you're a different kind of business, right? People have to think of you independently, and you have to have some way of maintaining a connection with them. So, you know, this is why email newsletters have become such a hot commodity in the publisher world, right? Because it allows us to sidestep the need for you to, you know, look up a piece of information in order to find it. Instead, someone will just kind of send it to you. So, you know, I think podcasts are another thing, frankly, right? Because like we don't rely on Google search really for people to find the podcast. It just gets delivered to them in a feed once they become subscribers. So these are the kinds of things that I think more publishers need to be thinking about. But even then, Kevin, the scale of the businesses is going to decline because in its heyday, Google really would send millions and millions of visits to website. And in a world where that's about to decline, the size of the audience that you can build is smaller, which means that the staff that you can afford to pay gets much smaller. So I just think that we are going to be living in the fallout of this for a really long time. And I gotta say, man, I was emotional yesterday in a way that I was not proud of. And not that I was like crying at Google I/O, but I just felt really out of sorts. Within the past 48 hours of this
That should
recording,
not really
I have one friend who got laid off from their media job, and I had two other friends who are currently employed in media jobs who told me that they're looking for other jobs right now. And in every case, the answer is the same. The money just isn't there the way that they all thought it would be, right? And so that's just, my story, past 48 hours, 3 people looking to leave. We already, we could name the publications that have shut down in the past year. There are more that are going to shut down in this year. And so I understand, maybe this just sounds like two reporters navel-gazing and, maybe we're spending too much time on this. But what I'm telling you is the thing that is happening to the media businesses is going to happen to the other businesses. It turns out that in a world where everything is online, how people find stuff, how they discover new businesses, that matters a lot. And when all of that is about to be hidden away behind some black box algorithm that summarizes what it thinks is the best thing based on whatever and who knows, I truly do not think people are prepared for this world.
Yeah, and I think Google obviously has, reasons for wanting to, evolve its search engine in this way. I also think it's a very risky move for them for a few reasons. One is, as we know, these AI overviews can get things wrong. They can be untrustworthy. They can be erratic. I saw there was a screenshot going around the other day on social media where someone asked Google, what are some food names that end with And Google's experimental AI overview said, here's some fruit names that end with Applum, banana strawberry tomatum, and coconut. And that's a funny example, but I think there are going to be a lot of examples of these AI overviews, at least in their early days, just getting things wrong. I do think that will start to erode trust in Google over time.
I think that is possible, but I would not count on it because there are mistakes on all the web pages that people are visiting to, and I'm not sure how much it just matters in the end.
Yeah, I think there's also a business risk here too. Google, it does make the vast majority of its money from showing ads right there on the search results page, and it remains to be seen whether they can sort of monetize these AI overviews as effectively as their traditional search results. By the way, they also make a lot of money showing ads on third-party websites. Their Google ad network is a big part of their business, tens of billions of dollars a year. If all of those web pages suddenly have to close up because they're not getting any traffic from Google anymore, then that part of Google's ad business has to shrink as well.
So that is totally true. But keep in mind, Kevin, it is Google that has its fingers on the knobs. Google is the one in control here. It gets to decide how fast or slow it moves in a case like this. If it does something that dramatically changes something in a way it doesn't like, it can always edge that back. The important thing is, it is the one in the driver's seat now for what the future of the web looks like. And what they are telling us is Google is just going to keep more and more of the median internet experience to itself within its own walled garden.
Yeah. Do you find any reasons for optimism in what you heard this week at I/O?
Well, I was so desperate for optimism that I texted a tech executive, who I have some of these back channel conversations with. And this is an executive who I think it's fair to say generally thinks that I over-rotate on being, concerned and a worrier, because, you talk to people in tech, they're mostly just optimistic about everything. They think everything is going to be fine for everyone. Of course, they also live in mansions. But anyway, this person said to me that essentially people still want novel content and experiences on the web. They want to have shared experiences with their friends. They want real relationships, right, with publications, with writers. And so if you are the kind of media business or you're the kind of journalist that does have an authentic audience, that you are doing a really good job for, that you're doing something novel, you're doing something really smart, you might wind up being in a better position coming out of all of this. Because as much as I love the media, it is also true that there's a lot of garbage in our business. And there are a lot of unscrupulous publishers that are publishing lists of, quote, the best vacuum that haven't tested a single vacuum in their entire life, but they figure there's some upside in getting some of that affiliate revenue. So if you want an optimistic case, it is that Google will sort of cause all of those bad actors to wash out, and it will leave a few brave, proud publishers that are doing honest work standing to reap more of the benefits.
Yeah, I think my reason for optimism here is that I actually do think that it is in Google's long-term self-interest for there to be a vibrant and healthy internet. I think that if Google starts sort of just aggregating and summarizing the internet and spoon feeding it to people through these AI overviews, I think that'll work fine for a while, and then I think they will start to see one website close, and 10 websites close, and 100 websites close. And within a couple of years, you're looking at just a very diminished internet. And Google in that world is not going to have, what is its AI going to crawl and summarize if there are no websites left? So I just think that, we will end up in a world where all of the valuable information on the internet is sort of hidden behind paywalls and subscription publications, maybe newsletters and podcasts. And you will just see sort of an impoverished Google that is out there scraping as hard as it can, trying to summarize what it finds and not coming up with much.
Yeah, well, I do think that is a possibility. I also think Google will just get increasingly good. I was having this discussion with friends last night of like essentially this exact thing. Where is Google going to find the information anymore? And you might think of one example. Well, let's say you go to Paris and you want to know like what's the best bakery. Well, today I would rely on a travel writer who has been there and been there recently, right? Because the best bakery from in 2024 might not be the best bakery in 2020. And we started talking about it's like, well, Google could actually just kind of look at the foot traffic in all of the bakeries in Paris and say this one is the most popular. And that is not actually going to require there to be a healthy web feeding it that information, right? These companies collect so much data about us, and they are going to come up with so many more novel ways to use it that I really do wonder if maybe we aren't flattering ourselves when we tell ourselves that they need us.
I hope you're wrong.
I hope I'm wrong. I've never hoped for anything more.
But I think this is sort of the flip side of AI vertigo, this feeling of like, wow, the future is coming, is like, I don't know that our institutions, including our media institutions, understand the gravity of what happened this week at Google, which was that they did essentially declare that we are moving into a very different era of the internet.
We have talked on this show for more than a year now about automation, AI coming for jobs. It has seemed like something on a kind of medium to distant horizon, but I do think that at I/O this week, we saw the beginning of an arrival of something like that. And again, it is starting in the media, but it is not going to stop there.
Can I just say one more thing before we close the segment? Because I got a little emotional watching Google I/O, the keynote yesterday too. I got a little emotional watching this announcement too, for maybe some similar reasons as you. But my emotion was like, I just feel like I'm being gaslit here. Like publishers, people who work in online media have known that Google has plans to shove generative AI into search results for years. We talked to the CEO of Perplexity a few months ago, who basically told us like, yes, if we do start generating these AI summaries of search results, people will click on less news. And I actually admired that he was honest about that. Google is not being honest about this. They are telling people we are still committed to sending traffic to publishers. People are not going to stop clicking on links just because they have these like AI summaries above their search results. And I really just wish that someone at Google would come out and say, yes, your traffic is going to fall off a cliff.
To get up on a cliff to fall off it. I don't think I'll have a problem if I have my stuff to do my thing. Money. What do you think of whenever you hear in a literary class? The setting, the place, time, who, what, where, when, why, how. Stuff like that. Anyways. Just doing the lore walkers for no reason, basically. All I really need to do is heroic mythic if I want it. I guess that's how you get the best gear. Now I have at least every piece. I got the neck off stream. The appearances. It's nice to pick those up. It's gonna take some time still. This goes on for another like 80 minutes. Something. You're going to have to do something somewhere in there. Right. There has to be some sort of conclusion of the event. So all you're going to do is kill Garrosh for the spikes. You're just going to keep on killing Garrosh. Nothing else matters. Bones and Mana Rock. One on five.
But here's why we think it's important anyway. But instead, they are trying to signal to users that this is going to be a good and useful thing. They are trying to make publishers feel less scared. And frankly, it just felt like it felt like attending a funeral disguised as a wedding.
Yeah, and this actually is the reason that we need media to exist in this world, is because we will try to tell you the truth about something. We will try to go beyond our own narrow self-interest and tell you what's going on this planet.
It drives me insane. Just tell me we're going to, basically destroy the foundations of the open internet.
No, I felt exactly the same way.
How was the food?
Not great. My context window is full, Kevin, and we will have to return to this subject another time.
Yes, I think we will have plenty more opportunities to revisit this subject.
And you can find us podcasting under an old bridge on the abandoned railroad tracks.
What's your post-media plan for when all the Google traffic, are you going to become a farmer if the digital media dies?
I'm getting really into TV and VCR repair.
I think there's a bright future in that.
Yeah. Hey, that's the end of this clip. If you liked what you saw, head on over to our page and subscribe, and you can get the full podcast. We do a show like this almost every week on tech and the future. Head on over there now and subscribe.
walk away from this. It's been only the last since up until
This news is funded by viewers. Catastrophe intensifies. The United Nations suspended all food distribution in the southern Gaza city of Rafah due to escalating Israeli attacks and a lack of supplies. Meanwhile, the Pentagon has admitted none of the humanitarian aid brought in from a new U.S.-made pier in Gaza has actually been distributed to Palestinians. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has told senators that the Biden administration is ready to work on efforts to potentially sanction officials at the International Criminal Court after the court's chief prosecutor requested arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. Blinken called the ICC decision, quote, profoundly wrong-headed. Meanwhile, pro-Palestinian protesters repeatedly disrupted Blinken Tuesday as he testified before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Many of the protesters had their hands painted red to symbolize blood. Another protester who disrupted Blinken condemned Israel's killing of 6-year-old Palestinian girl Hind Rajab.
The People's Republic of China is pursuing.
Rajab was 6 years old when Israelis killed her. Hind Rajab was 6 years old. Blinken, you will be remembered as the butcher of Gaza. You will be remembered for murdering innocent Palestinians.
According to the group Code
Okay,
Pink,
the
4
running
protesters
instructions.
were arrested during former State Department official Anne Wright, who was injured while Capitol Police ejected her from the hearing. Police violently raided a student encampment at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. At least 4 protesters were arrested, 2 others hospitalized after being pepper sprayed by police. We'll go to Michigan later in the program. Meanwhile, academic workers at the University of California, Santa Cruz began a strike Monday to protest the crackdown on pro-Palestinian student protesters. The strike comes days after the UAW local, which represents 48,000 workers in the UC system, voted to authorize a system-wide strike. In other education news, the faculty at Dartmouth has voted to censure the school's president, Sion Baila, for calling in the police to shut down a peaceful student protest in solidarity with Palestine. Meanwhile, the faculty senate at the University of Massachusetts Amherst has voted no confidence in the school's chancellor, Javier Reyes, after police arrested more than 130 at a student encampment earlier this month. Press freedom groups and the Biden administration criticized Israel Tuesday after Israeli officials seized camera and broadcasting equipment from the Associated Press in an effort to block the news agency from sending a live video feed of Gaza from southern Israel. Israel's communications minister later reversed the decision, and AP has resumed airing the live video. Closing arguments will begin next Tuesday in Donald Trump's criminal hush money and 2016 election interference trial. The defense rested their case Tuesday after Trump declined to take the stand, even though he repeatedly said he would. Donald Trump's campaign has removed a social media video that included a reference to, quote, the creation of a unified Reich. The campaign's decision came after the former president was widely denounced for adopting a term often associated with the Nazis. President Biden accused Trump of using, quote, Hitler's language. Meanwhile, Trump suggested in an interview on Tuesday that he supports restrictions on birth control. He was questioned by a journalist at KDKA in Pittsburgh.
Do you support any restrictions on a person's right to contraception?
Well, we're looking at that, and I'm going to have a policy on that very shortly, and I think it's something that you'll find interesting.
Trump went on to say, quote, some states are going to have different policy than others, unquote. After facing backlash, Trump wrote on social media that he would, quote, never advocate imposing restrictions on birth control. Primaries were held Tuesday in Georgia, Idaho, Kentucky, and Oregon. In Georgia, Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis, who's prosecuting Donald Trump, won a contested Democratic primary. Fulton County Superior Court Judge Scott McAfee, who is hearing the Trump case in Georgia, also won Tuesday. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, led prayers earlier today at a massive funeral ceremony in Tehran for the Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi, who died in a helicopter crash Sunday that also killed Iran's foreign minister and other officials. Raisi will be buried Thursday in his hometown of Rashad. In news from Sudan, Doctors Without Borders reports at least 85 people have died in recent days in fighting in the Darfur city of El Fasher. This comes as the United Nations is warning a genocide may already be occurring in Sudan. Alice Wairimu Nediritu, the UN Special Advisor on the Prevention of Genocide, addressed the UN Security Council.
I would like today to raise my alarm in a clear and unequivocal way about the ongoing situation in Sudan. This situation today bears all the marks of risk of genocide, with strong allegations that this crime has already been committed.
A Greek judge has dismissed a case against 9 Egyptian men accused of smuggling migrants in the pilot's shipwreck that killed some 600 people last June. The decision came just after the men's trial began. The accused men had said they were being scapegoated and are themselves victims. In the southern Mexican state of Chiapas, 14 people have been killed in attacks targeting local candidates ahead of the June 2nd election. According to one tally, at least 134 people have been killed in politically motivated attacks in Mexico this year, including 24 political candidates. During a debate on Sunday, presidential frontrunner Claudia Sheinbaum of the Morena Party vowed to continue the policies of Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador.
We are going to build a
I
future
did this
of peace
before a
and
long time
prosperity.
ago.
Our country's
There
transformation
might be a
has
few
already
that
begun.
require a little bit extra. Sure. What this label was. Why is it all? That's such a
and we will continue it. We have results, and we're going to take them to the whole country.
Scheinbaum's top challenger, Xochitl Galvez, accused the current government of failing to fight organized crime.
Security has been a failure in the 6-year term. 186,000 people have been murdered, and 50,000 people have disappeared. What has been the strategy of this government? To hand the country over to organized crime. I propose a new security strategy. No more hugs for the criminals.
If either of the two front runners win, they will become the first female president in Mexico's history. And the cultural historian and author H. Bruce Franklin has died at the age of 90. He was a former Air Force navigator and intelligence officer who became radicalized by the U.S. war in Vietnam. In 1972, Franklin became the first tenured professor to be fired by Stanford University after the school accused him of inciting students to take over a campus computer center which had ties to the U.S. military. He later taught at Rutgers University in Newark. He was the author of 20 books on topics ranging from the Vietnam War to Herman Melville. He appeared on Democracy Now! In 2000, where he spoke about Vietnam.
American fantasies made it possible for us to participate in that war, to carry out the most systematic destruction of a nation that any nation has ever done in history. And part of the time thinking that we were there for good reasons to defend peace and democracy and so on. That was all based on fantasies.
And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Democracy Now! Is funded by viewers like you. Please give today at democracynow.org/give.
Hello, buddy. Today we're going to be checking out and installing and browsing the internet on Redstone OS. That is the North Korean operating system that is essentially KDE Rice to look like macOS. And I actually think they've done a really good job of the theming here. Okay. Now we can use DHCP. Now, of course, by default, this is actually designed... It's, of course, designed for the Korean intranet, but you can use it elsewhere. Although, interestingly, it's only got a few time zones by default. Osaka, Japan, Pyongyang, Tokyo, Japan, and Yakutsk, Russia. Now, I can understand excluding South Korea, but why no China? That's an interesting question. Okay, and now we can get right into our operating system. Didn't take that long to install. Okay, that's the bootloader for Redstone. It's got a patriotic logo. And I also heard it's got some low-level security and censorship features. I don't think that's going to have a big impact, but let's see. There are also some people who think it phones home. I would doubt it purely because any such functionality is probably going to be designed for the Korean intranet, not the public internet. Okay, so the Firefox is completely in Korean. And one thing you can notice is this is using a 10-space IP address, which is a local intranet IP address. And I guess their whole intranet runs on this. But now let's try a website that's on the internet. Now we have DNS, and we should be able to reach the internet. If we can't, we can look at the settings. Okay, so it seems like our DNS settings actually got overridden somehow. Despite what it had, and our local domain. Now that we should have working DNS. Frankie. Weird Firefox. I believe it's rice to look like Safari, and it kind of looks like Safari. So we had to go through a few folders to find our admin, and now we've got app. Can we use sudo? We can, okay. So if we have sudo, then we can do anything that root can. Let's see what it asks. So looks like we do actually have an IP address. Now running a command called root setting, we can enable the root user. And here we can enter a password for the root user. Like this to enable it. Now we should be able to operate as root. Now with that, we can change the UI to English. There's a command for that. Okay. Now I've changed the language. We can reboot the system for that to take effect. Now I'm signed in as the root user. Now I don't really understand the whole point of having that root setter command. And now let's see if nay nara. Okay, nay nara never goes into English mode. But that's okay. Now this page is never going to work because it's not an internet URL. But let's see if we can get Google working. So here's the magic. How does it stop us from using the internet? Well, it's got a bunch of IP tables rules. Because despite having DNS settings, you're not allowed to use them. So we've got the application filter, but it's actually, it blocks DNS, and it blocks a lot of things. Wow. So we can simply, remove this file. It's going to be service restore IP tables, I think, because this is service. I always get this mixed up because on systemd it's the opposite of what it was on the old. Okay. And now Google works. Now I also thought it'd be interesting to see, can we update this system using the package manager? Now this appears to be some sort of Red Hat base, but the answer seems to be no, because they've completely nuked the thing that would allow you to do that. But we can use this browser. Okay, no, we have to do it in here, because of course that's going to a North Korean search engine that wouldn't work. And here's a bunch of commentary about Redstone OS. Let's see if we can actually watch a YouTube video on it. I can't read Korean, but I can try and translate this in editing. Oh, it's a certificate error. That makes sense, actually, because... Oh no, it's just going back to the intranet. Of course, there's not going to be any special certificates installed on this version. Let's try some other sites. Does Bing work? Not really. Wikipedia? Certificate error. It's kind of unfortunate how the modern internet is so reliant on SSL that actually doing anything on older operating systems or operating systems of questionable origins is a lot trickier. Because even though the HTTP protocol is backwards and forwards compatible all the way to version 1, certificates require modern OS and a certificate store. Now, it also comes with a Office suite, which once again does not have an English translation, and this is basically, this pretty much looks like Excel on Mac. We can try out some formulas. There's probably some sort of fork of LibreOffice or OpenOffice. Yeah, we have to start with Firebase if we want to use exponential. And yeah, it works. Oh, that's weird. I don't know what version that would have changed, but that's actually weird. Because it seems to be hitting a... Yeah, okay. Okay, no, actually, it's not... I kind of wrote the formula. I was thinking that's really weird. And it's got Lucida Grande, which was, at the time of this operating system's release, this was the font that macOS would use. And yeah, this is definitely LibreOffice. I remember this graphing editor. And it, yeah, works just like LibreOffice. This one looks like some kind of security program, but it's actually a pretty decent looking music program, which is not what I was expecting. Of course, have system preferences, utilities, software manager. Now, I don't think we're going to be able to get any more software because... No, we're absolutely not, because, of course, we're not on the Korean intranet, and there is no way, short of going to North Korea to get on it. Got a simple text editor, an email client, which I imagine is not going to do anything interesting. Probably would work, but it's not going to... Okay, what does Grab do? It's also a very... Grab is a very popular app in Southeast Asia. It's like the Asian equivalent of Uber, but I don't think this has any correlation to that. This is some sort of help file viewer, I would guess, but I don't know if we've got any CHM files. And now we've got the ability to put in a DVD. We can auto-run it. Note, executing a file on a medium may compromise your system security. There we go. And this is a logo for the Redstone installer, which is actually called Ubuntu Custom ISO Preseed. Also got an exe file. I think this comes with wine, so we might actually be able to run this. If we go down to the terminal, or the console, because of course this is still a KDE base, despite looking like a Mac. Really though, it works. Like, I actually think the UI design here... Okay, it doesn't have one. I actually think the UI design here is good. Obviously, they put a lot of work into this. Okay. Got some Python files. Now let's see if we can... Of course we can open these. Simple text. Wow, they made the whole GTK GUI in Python, which is... I guess people do that, but that's pretty cool. And it's technically then, even though it's got like a red hat... How does it have an... Okay, it's not. I thought for a second, how does it have an ISO of itself? LPMs. See what... These are all the programs that come with Redstone. Now, unfortunately, binary compatibility is not that good on Linux, so you're unlikely to be able to just take these and run these on a modern Linux system. But with some tweaking, some of these might work. Oh, we got some GNOME utilities. We've also got SE Linux, which usually would come with something like Fedora or Red Hat. And I don't know if that's doing anything particularly special here. But it's quite a common package. It's secure Linux. Got system config. And here's where our theme lives. Wonder if we could... Is there a way of changing those? Because I know the previous versions of Redstone did have more of a Windows XP look, but no, it doesn't. Oh, we even have the graphite theme from macOS. The widely believed backstory on the theme of this is that Kim Jong-un himself bought a Mac. Hello, buddy. Today we're going to be... Yeah, no, we have to start with the higher... How the modern internet is so reliant on SSL that actually doing anything on older operating systems or operating systems of questionable origins is of this operating system's release. This was the font that macOS would use. And yeah, this is definitely LibreOffice. I remember this graphing editor. And it, yeah, works just like LibreOffice.
Sup, you beautiful bastards. Welcome back to the Philip DeFranco Show, your daily dive into the news. I hope you're having a good, Wednesday evening, Thursday morning. We have got a lot to talk about on today's extra large show, so hit that like button to train YouTube to let it know you like these big daily dives into the news, and let's jump into it. Starting with, I want you to rate the following sentence on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 being a mild and acceptable statement, and 10 being the most batshit crazy thing you've ever heard. Here we go. If one of my employees secretly films you on the toilet, that's your fault, you negligent child. That's a 2, right? You're like, yeah, makes sense. Not in any way completely disconnected from reality, right? And understand, we are not talking about a hypothetical. This is the actual insane legal defense that American Airlines just concocted in this case from back in September. I'll explain, or I'll try to. Right, so on this Boston-bound flight, you had a 14-year-old girl having to use the bathroom. So one of the flight attendants, Estes Carter Thompson III, seemingly does something kind for her purely out of the goodness of his heart. He says, oh, no, little girl, don't use the coach bathroom, come use the first class one instead. With him even escorting her there, though, before he let her in, he reportedly had to go in himself to wash his hands and told her that the toilet seat was broken. And so after he leaves, she enters, she does her business, and then noticed something that was very, very off. Taped to the underside of the toilet lid with red seat broken stickers is an iPhone with a recording light on. And y'all, I am arguing that the harm caused by its outside legal counsel, and saying that this defense does not represent its stance and has directed that it be amended. Right? Or seemingly they saw how this situation was growing and saw which way the wind was blowing. But with all that said, I gotta pass the question off to you. What are your thoughts here? AI, they are...
I just can't believe there are that many people out there. We taught like 26 people. 40 years ago. Message completely uneducated.
Also on the radar of another huge creator by the name of CoffeeZilla, with him now putting out a video saying not only is the R1 flawed, but also alleging that it was built on a scam and shows a pattern of Rabbit failing to deliver on its pie-in-the-sky promises. Because before it was called Rabbit, Coffee claims that the company was originally called Cyber Manufacture Co., with that name change actually only happening 2 months before its official announcement.
And it turns out that name change is pretty significant, because Cyber Manufacture Co. wasn't just like a shell company or the same company under a different name. They had separately raised venture capital for a completely different project. Not AI, it was for NFTs.
Right, so the NFT project was called Gamma, with Coffee noting that this was back in 2021 when NFTs were all the rage, with Gamma raising about $6 million. And Coffee going on to say that this whole endeavor is especially shocking to look into because in 2024, the company's CEO, Jesse, said that they would never touch crypto, never. And so when Gamma comes up, Jesse boils it down to a little COVID project that he did once, saying, NFTs were released, he bought some himself, but he left the project when it was open source. But looking into all of that, Coffee claims that Jesse actually made massive promises with Gamma, like promises of a Gamma verse and plans to launch the first carbon neutral or negative cryptocurrency. But these crypto coins or tokens, they weren't released, and Coffee claimed that the $6 million raised for the NFT project, it's just unclear if it went to Rabbit, somewhere else, or who knows. But he did say that all these issues tie back to the R1 device.
This project is built on the skeleton of that scam project. It's also because the R1 was overhyped in a similar way as a do-it-all device. But this same company isn't some historyless company. They have a history of abandoning investors like they did with Gamma NFTs.
Right, alleging that there is a pattern here because some of the Gamma promises were just huge. Like his carbon neutral crypto idea then turned into this plan where the NFTs would create a clean energy grid that people could then co-own that would produce coins. There were hopes for storefronts, comic books, brain logic controlled tools. It all kind of sounding insane, but Coffee also argued it's important to listen to this because the same CEO is trying to sell us the future of AI.
Look, I'm not here to stump for the bigwig venture capitalists who lost their faces on this. At the end of the day, these are both consumer-facing businesses. They got real people to invest real money into both the $200 Rabbit R1 and into this Gamma NFT project. Both are overhyped. One just already didn't deliver what they promised, while the other is working on fixing it.
With Coffee going on to say that Gamma NFT owners should get their money returned, estimating about $1 million worth of refunds and claiming that Jesse previously suggested this before. But also, notably for its part, the Rabbit team has responded to Coffee, saying there's no way to actually refund an NFT unless the owner agrees to burn the tokens on the blockchain. Also saying we don't agree with calling the Gamma project abandoned when it was open sourced and given back to the community in alignment with community feedback. Also further accusing him of taking Jesse's comments announcements out of context and claiming that the $6 million in venture funding raised for Gamma was only used for the Gamma project. And with that, saying that they delivered on their promises by creating and selling NFTs, establishing an IP studio, and creating a sort of metaverse and open sourcing that project. With Coffee saying that the Rabbit team also denied Gamma ever promising a carbon negative coin, that it was just an idea. But Coffee maintains that they did promise this and they just failed to deliver, even pointing to a video that they once released that said,
"Ultimately, our efforts will lead to the Gamma token, the first ever carbon negative cryptocurrency powered by our sun. Together, we will create a sustainable future for all life on the planet we call home. Join the Discord today."
They're saying, sure, they did deliver some other things, but they weren't what they initially said they would do, nor were they nearly as big as their promises, especially when it comes to the carbon negative coin. With Coffee ultimately saying that he'll leave it to the viewer to decide who to believe here. Though notably, it also seems like this might just be the start of his efforts looking into Rabbit. Because last week, he tweeted asking former or current employees of the company to message him. So we'll have to wait to see if anything comes from this, and in the meantime, I'd love to know your thoughts. And then, in huge internet news, let's talk about the Try Guys. Because they just announced what every fandom loves to hear: change. Fans love change. Everyone knows that. I'm kidding. But so far, we are actually seeing a very overwhelmingly positive response, which you might not think would happen after, that whole Watcher debacle. But so far, varying levels of positive for each of the announcements. Or with the first being that they're launching their own streaming service, with Zach telling Rolling Stone, "We're at a point where we find that our taste and our audience's taste is at odds with what algorithm, specifically the YouTube algorithm, rewards." And they elaborated on that in a video that they put out today, noting that YouTube is changing, which is fine. But because the algorithm doesn't always favor what their viewers want,
these are all layers that separate us and you. So moving forward, we're at a crossroads, right? We have two options. We can be successful on YouTube by making stuff that we and you guys don't truly love, or
we can slowly fade away into irrelevancy, making cool shit that the algorithm doesn't care about.
So they decided to pave a new road, which is why they announced their ad-free subscription streaming service, which is called Second Try. It's available worldwide, your phone, TV, other devices, but also notably with this saying they're not leaving YouTube.
And if YouTube is still the best way for you to watch us, we get it. So all the shows you're used to seeing here will still be here.
All of our shows will still be here, sometimes a little later, sometimes a lot later.
But on Second Try, you're gonna get early access to old favorites.
Ooh, uncensored content that YouTube won't allow.
Oh, exclusive new stuff just for you!
They'll have new content on their service as well as content that they greenlight from other creators. And it'll cost $4.99 monthly, or you get a discount when you sign up for a year. And also with all of this, there's the announcement that they're expanding their cast, which is then connected to the announcement I was most interested to see the reaction to, and that is Eugene. With that, they told Rolling Stone that this upcoming season will be his last as he goes on to pursue other creative endeavors. And Eugene, for his part, said he's so proud of what the Try Guys have become, and saying more answers regarding his future involvement are coming tomorrow. And so with all that, there's a question of, well, why is this being received so positively compared to Watcher, right? Especially as people are actively making comparisons. And while going through the reactions or looking at the likes to dislikes, not everyone is fully on board. You see a number of people saying, the service rollout from the Try Guys sounds a lot stronger and better for fans than what Watcher initially talked about. Top comments on the announcement saying things like, "This was much better done than the Watchers who made their sad couch video like a boohoo or poor moment, instead of, hey, we want to make stuff that YouTube thinks is a sin, do you want to watch it?" Plus, they're looping their ticketed live shows into it as well, which is a nice perk for people who already pay for those. As well as, this is strong Dropout vibes, meaning they seem to be taking a page from the Dropout playbook. No restraints placed on them by corporations. Company create the content they want, not be stymied by the unreasonable, unfair, and inconsistent rulings of YouTube on what is and isn't allowed in a video, hiring, collaborating with friends, and other personalities. And regarding Eugene, one of the top comments saying, "At least it's official. I feel like we've been getting ghosted for 2 years. This feels like finally breaking up officially." So the final thing I will say here is I wonder how many groups and creators out there saw the whole Watcher debacle and since then have had to go back and rework their similar announcements to off-platform subscriptions. Because make no mistake, the Try Guys are not going to be the last ones to do this, and if anything, it feels like a small part of a much bigger trend. And it's yet another example of sometimes it's not best to be the first one through the door or the first one through the door in a while. And then we'll get back to the news in a second, but I gotta say, I don't always have time for breakfast, lunch, a snack in the morning. I've got too much going on. But today's sponsor can grab up to 100 diapers per month, totally free of charge for children under 2 years old. Though I will say, for those of you that haven't had children or you've never really been around babies, while that sounds like a lot, it's also not a ton. Babies under 2 years old, they're essentially 24/7 pissing, shitting, eating machines. In fact, I looked into this. On average, they'll use as many as 300 diapers per month. While very beneficial, this program will actually only cover about a third of that. Though as they become toddlers, that number drops to around 150, which is also why Tennessee diaper banks hand out millions of diapers each year. And even with that, they can't keep up with the rising demand, especially as the cost has shot up since the pandemic, with families being seen spending over $1,000 on them over the year. And I mean, that's just for one kid. So you have the National Diaper Bank Network saying that nearly 47% of American families struggle to afford diapers in 2023. So what we actually often see is that because of that financial stress, parents will try to save money by conserving their supply, which, can mean leaving their baby in the same diaper for as long as possible, sometimes a full day or even longer. Which, I mean, that's just the setup for rashes, UTIs, fevers, blisters, boils. Also, there's things that you might not think about, like if you can't supply a full day's worth of diapers, most daycare centers won't let you in, which in those situations means that a parent all of a sudden they're gonna have to miss work, which only squeezes finances even more. And so that said, even if it is only a partial fix, Tennessee's new program could make a huge difference for poor families. And actually, as a kind of cherry on top here, the state also lowered the bar for Medicaid eligibility by tying it to the federal poverty line. So whereas before, a parent in a household of 3 couldn't earn more than $1,600 a month, now they can still make up to $2,000 and still qualify for the diapers and other benefits. With Republican Governor Bill Lee, who touted the diaper program as a pro-life, pro-family measure, saying he hopes that it'll provide a model for other states to follow. Or as more liberal advocates hope, a model for the federal government. Because right now, there is no federal program, not even SNAP covers diapers. And even if there was, that's only one expense. It doesn't include formula, clothing, wipes, medicine, daycare, probably other stuff that I'm also forgetting right now. But progress is progress, and it should be celebrated. Though, not every change is a good one. Like I said, this is a tale of 2 states, and the second state is Louisiana. Louisiana is in the news because they're about to become the first ever state to classify abortion pills as controlled dangerous substances, and with that, punish illegal possession of it accordingly. Because we just saw their state house pass a bill that would classify both pills taken in the 2-step medication abortion procedure as Schedule 4 drugs, which puts them in the same category as opioids, narcotics, and other highly addictive drugs. And under the legislation, anyone outside the medical profession possessing these drugs without a valid prescription could be charged with a felony punishable by up to...
I mean, it's kind of sketch if there's like people that are just like bills in the food service industry.
to 5 years in prison and fines of up to $5,000. Though pregnant people who possess the drugs for their own consumption would be exempt and doctors can still prescribe it. But also, very notably here, both medication and surgical abortions are already banned in Louisiana with limited exceptions to save a patient's life or when a fetus can't survive, but not for things like rape or incest. So, doctors are already banned from prescribing abortion pills to end pregnancies in almost all cases, but they can prescribe it for other critical uses. Because something you might not know, I just learned it today too, is that one of the 2 drugs used for abortions actually has a lot of other important purposes. It can prevent gastrointestinal ulcers, aid in labor and delivery, and stop excessive bleeding after a miscarriage or childbirth, which is also why you have tons of doctors and medical professionals pushing back against this bill, arguing that it's just going to delay care for patients in need and increase fear among pharmacists that they will be prosecuted for filling these prescriptions. And this is, you also have other experts condemning the proposal as unscientific, saying abortion pills are just not addictive drugs that people use to get high like other Schedule 4 substances. And with this, arguing that the move goes against scheduling guidelines that are meant to classify drugs by weighing their potential for misuse and danger with their medical benefits. And then even beyond that, many have also raised questions about how this law would be enforced. With Dana Sussman, for example, senior vice president of the advocacy group Pregnancy Justice, telling the Washington Post, how will prosecutors determine whether this is for one's own use or not? Will they perform pregnancy tests? It's creating this idea of a surveillance state for pregnancy that feels quite dystopian. But as far as what happens next, the bill is having to head back to the Senate for final approval. Right, and that because the provision classifying abortion pills as dangerous drugs was an amendment to another bill that initially aimed to make it illegal to give a pregnant woman an abortion pill without their consent. But it is expected to get the votes, and it will then go to a Republican governor who is expected to sign it. But also, while we talk about a tale of 2 states, I mean, this legislation is super significant because it could reach way beyond Louisiana. Because Louisiana, they would just be the first state to take this step, with experts saying this will effectively create a roadmap for other states to follow suit. And then it is yet another day. So let's talk about more Israel and Palestine updates. Starting with yesterday, I mentioned that the UN had suspended relief efforts in Gaza due to a lack of supplies. Something that Israel claims is because Hamas steals supplies, though the US doubts that. We now have an update on that after the Pentagon said that it believes that no aid from the American-made pier actually has made it to the wider populace, and saying this is due to a few factors, including that the several trucks have been intercepted. However, they didn't say that it was Hamas, and outlets have said that it was just several desperate individuals. But regardless of the who and the why, the US is saying that they're working with Israel and the UN to make new routes so that the aid is actually making its way to those who need it. Then there's the update with the situation with the Associated Press. Because right after yesterday's show went out, Israel ended up reversing its decision and returned the outlet's equipment as well as let the live stream go back up. Though there is a bit of an asterisk there, as the communication minister said that the country still reserved the right to use the law on anyone providing Al Jazeera live feeds. But then that brings us to the news today that Spain, Norway, and Ireland decided to recognize Palestine as a state starting next week on May 28th, with Slovenia expected to follow shortly afterwards, which notably means that they'll be joining the nearly 140 countries worldwide worldwide that recognize Palestine, which is more than 2/3 of the UN. While this move doesn't mean that they're also unrecognizing Israel, that hasn't made Israel any less unhappy, with them summoning envoys from all three to accuse them of rewarding Hamas for the October 7th attack. With Israeli Foreign Minister Katz adding, "I am sending a clear message today. Israel will not hold back against those who undermine its sovereignty and endanger its security." After the terrorist organization Hamas carried out the largest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust after it committed the most horrific sex crimes the world has seen, these countries chose to give a reward to Hamas and Iran and recognize a Palestinian state. Israel has also decided to recall their ambassadors from all three countries, which just kind of further adds to the increasingly international isolation the country's been facing. However, this is also happening as the countries who made this decision wanted to make it clear that this was not an anti-Israel move, with Spain's prime minister saying this recognition is not against anyone. It is not against the Israeli people. It is an act in favor of peace, justice, and moral consistency. While this act is really seen as more symbolic right now and it won't really change how they interact with Palestine, you do have some saying that it does add pressure onto Israel to seriously try to negotiate a two-state solution. Right? Many Israelis are actually open to the idea, although Netanyahu is not, especially if Hamas is still around, with this coalition arguing that for as long as that group is still around, it stands a chance of taking over Palestine, which would then pose an existential threat to Israel. And then on the Palestinian side, there's also a split. The group that controls the West Bank is open to a two-state solution, and both it and Israel were seriously negotiating this back in the early 2000s before negotiations broke down. And of course, so much has happened since then, many people pointing to things like Netanyahu's support of Israeli settlements within the West Bank that erode Palestinian territorial claims. And then, of course, there's Hamas, which historically opposed recognizing Israel. Though their tune also seems to be changing, at least publicly, because of this war, with them saying that they're possibly open to the idea of a two-state solution that uses the 1967 borders. But like with every aspect of this story, and really any piece of news, words are words, actions are actions, and for now, we're gonna have to wait to see how things actually play out on the ground. And then, most of the year, fancy underwear technology, it might sound unnecessary. Breathable, quick dry, moisture wicking, anti-odor, overkill. But then summer hits. Suddenly, steaming beads of sweat are forming slimy pools in places they shouldn't, or at least you don't want. Suddenly, breathable, quick dry, moisture wicking, and anti-odor, they're sounding pretty damn essential. Main point being, summer is coming, and you need to be prepared like me with the sponsor of the PDS, MeUndies. Because MeUndies has breathable cuts for everyone this summer. Their signature suit of Texas A&M International University. And looking deeper, one study in 2021 looked at how video games affected kids between the ages of 4 and 7. And they're finding that there is a significant positive association between time spent playing recreational video games and selective attention. Right, and honing selective attention skills is actually really useful. It's the ability to focus on a single thing and ignore distractions, which is a skill that could arguably be transferred over later in life to study for more effective periods of time, and not just my son not listening to me when I say dinner's ready. But also, this same group also gets massive benefits from gaming in a clinical setting. And I know that may sound weird, but there are games meant to help people manage pain or prevent asthma attacks, and they work shockingly well. Gaming's also been shown to improve brain plasticity, which is a fancy way of saying your ability to change how it responds to learning. And this isn't only good for developing minds, but also for adults where, life can get in the way of stimulating your mind. For some of you, that may sound insignificant, but there is a lot to suggest that constantly learning, that helps build new connections within the brain that in the long term could help hold off things like dementia. Plus, everything we're talking about here, that's just how it affects our minds. Because there are also other physical benefits like fine motor control and coordination that help with career paths. And in fact, as far back as 2007, it was shown in the Archives of Surgery, which is a journal on that subject, that surgeons who game have much better fine motor control. And notably, since then, the need for such skills has just increased, not just because our surgeries have become more fine-tuned and need much better coordination, but also because the tools they use increasingly rely on controllers, like literally a controller. Because often now, the least invasive surgeries don't involve a surgeon sticking his hands into a patient at all, but rather a little machine. Maybe the next time you're gonna have to get surgery, you ask, hey, is my surgeon, do they play no build or build? Who do you main in Smash, doctor? Get the fuck out of here. You're only cutting me open if you play
Fox, Pikachu, Mr. Game & Watch.
My friend was operated on by a surgeon that played Kirby. He pees through 5 holes now. But also with gaming, some of the careers are a little bit more on the nose. Like how the military is actually shifting to using Xbox controllers for various applications after finding that they were almost ubiquitously understood by recruits. Even non-gamers at least grasp how to use a controller nowadays. So all of this isn't to say that video games are this cure-all for everything. There are definitely drawbacks. But playing a first-person shooter or any game, for that matter, it's not going to make you into a mass murderer as is often claimed. In fact, a 2017 study found that gamers didn't show any signs of being less empathetic than their counterparts. And possibly the only thing that even comes remotely close is that the American Psychological Association found that gaming can cause some aggression, especially in young children playing extremely violent games. And there, it can manifest in some hitting or fighting. Which, to be fair, you can show a young kid just about anything and they will copy it, which is also something we've seen in movies and TV. It's why, fucking shocker, being a parent matters. Moderating what your very young child sees or does, important. important. If you don't raise your child, the internet and random strangers will. But then even in that very specific situation of a very young child playing a violent game, it generally doesn't translate to a long-term problem, according to the British journal Royal Society Open Science, with them finding that teens who played violent games didn't exhibit any more aggression than those who didn't play them. And according to Dr. Ferguson, violent video games are like peanut butter. They are harmless for the vast majority of kids, but are harmful to a small minority with pre-existing personality or mental health problems. And so they can exacerbate issues in a small group of people, especially when they're children, which again is why across the world, games have a rating system. So these are rare cases where the kids shouldn't even be playing these games to begin with, as it's already been deemed inappropriate for them. It's also very similar to claiming that watching a horror movie will make a kid into a serial killer. And so really, possibly the worst thing that gaming does is that it can be addictive, something that the World Health Organization has even recognized, which leads to a wider variety of issues. Right? And even in cases where people aren't addicted, as Pew found with their study, it can negatively impact schooling and sleep schedules for a small group of students. So a hot take here, I don't think that it takes a lot to get a teen on a horrible sleep schedule or to ignore their homework. But anyway, that's where I'm going to end with this, because I know mostly I'm preaching to the choir a bit here. But hey, consider yourself armed with even more information for the next time your uncle at Thanksgiving starts blaming Call of Duty for a mass shooting. And then let's close out today's show with a congratulations and commentary. First, congratulations to Patty B, the latest winner of our weekly $500 giveaway towards any tickets on SeatGeek. Patty's heading to NoahCon at the Pilgrimage Music and Cultural Festival in September. And for everyone else, remember, SeatGeek and the Daily Dip are still giving away up to $1,000 in tickets, and you should definitely enter today if you haven't already. All you do is add code PDS to your SeatGeek app profile for a chance at the weekly $500 prize, no purchase necessary. And $1,000 prizes are available to Daily Dip subscribers who add code PDS newsletter, doubling entries and winnings. But that said, it brings us to commentary, where I'm going to dive into the comments on the last show and just kind of talk with you. Starting with the anti-Boeing comments, because there were no shortage of them yesterday. With Meg Doster saying, why is Boeing acting like 10-year-old me playing Roller Coaster Tycoon trying to kill off all my customers? Which, funny comment. Love that game, but I also gotta agree with most of the replies. Like, to be fair, this sounds like this isn't actually due to Boeing's apparent hatred for human life. I'm def a Boeing hater, but I don't know if this is one of those situations. One guy died and it was a heart attack, and how is clear air turbulence Boeing's fault? Ignorant take. And separately, folks like Ryan Meals saying, airline pilot here, this is why you hear flight crews say to please keep your seatbelts fastened, even if the seatbelt sign is off while you are seated. There's something called CAT, clear air disturbance, which cannot be seen or predicted, opposed to turbulence that occurs in certain types of clouds or associated with known weather systems. Unless other aircraft have reported the CAT, it can happen abruptly and be severe. 1 second can be smooth enough for us to have the seatbelt sign off, and then something like this could happen. So yeah, to the people out there that are like, why do I have to have my seatbelt on? What, I'm gonna need my seatbelt if I crash into a mountain? No, it's because of stuff like this. Safety theater exists, but this is not one of those things. Also, in those comments, there are people sharing their not only opinions, but their experiences regarding burn pits. People sharing stories like, my mother died of cancer caused by the burn pits. It was terrible seeing her constantly get rejected by the VA. But adding, I'm glad the vets who suffered from it can finally get the benefits they deserve. Rachel sharing, I lost my husband in 2015 from a cancer caused by the burn pits in Iraq. He fought the army and fought the VA, and it was so tiring, all the while he was fighting a cancer that eventually destroyed his lungs. This is a movement I have followed for a long time. It's long overdue, and yet it's still not enough. We need to do more for our vets. And with this, we also saw for all the vets down here in the comments, accredited veteran service officer VSO here. If you have questions, want assistance in filing a claim for service connection, or you were previously denied, please find a VSO in your area. We do the same job for free that a lot of lawyers are charging for. Most, if not all, counties have VSOs. There are also many national service organizations, DAV, Disabled American Vets, VFW, American Legion, etc., with VSOs, as well as your state's Department of Vet Affairs. So hopefully amplifying the news yesterday and, all the people chiming in here, it ends up finding who it needs to find and someone gets help. But for today, that's where I'm going to end this show. But one, I'll see you right back here on this channel tomorrow for more news, or two, if you missed the other video, click right there. Yeah, I love yo faces, and I hope you have a great one. I don't know. Good night. Don't know about that.
Okay, I'm out. And I might look into getting them out. It comes from the Horde campaign. I could check characters that have done Pandaria. I doubt it's switch my race change, blah blah blah. Just one character. What's up now?